Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Terry On. I'm your host, Mandy, and this is a podcast dedicated to talking about how to live life well in the messy middle, during the delays, in the waiting, on the detours, because let's be real, that's most of our life. We get these little blips, right? These little blips on the radar of really great seasons. And I say great season like the season where everything's just cool and like calm. So I use great very loosely in this way because I actually think there's a lot of greatness and abundance that happens on the detours and in the waiting, but it doesn't feel like it usually while you're there. And so this podcast is for those of us, I think, that need reminded, myself included, that there is abundance in the wilderness, that like the times of our lives that there can feel like there's like a scarcity or an uncertainty, that those seasons don't have to be empty internally for us. They can be very rich seasons that we actually end up looking back on and finding the silver linings and the gratitude and all of that. So that's what this podcast is. And today's episode is no different. And I want to start with what I'm gonna do a little segment. I think, you know, what's fun is like figuring this whole thing out every week. I just, some people are planners, and I'm a planner on certain things like our calendar because we have 42,000 people that live in this house. But typically I don't enjoy that as much. I actually would prefer to just wing it, especially when it comes to communication. So I do just show up on here and I'm like, all right, what are we going to talk about today? And that is a conversation I do have with myself. That is, no one else is here for me to say that I am alone doing this, but I have robust conversations with myself. Thank you. So I did think about a segment that I would like to do regularly, and maybe I shouldn't have said all of this. We could be in the oversharing territory, but here we are knee deep and you're coming along. So we have this jar of seashells. We collect shells every year at the beach, and we try to find like large enough ones. I mean, I find the cute little baby ones too as fillers, but we try to find these large ones that we can write on. We keep them in jars around our house, and when we have a story that's like representing God's goodness, faithfulness, miracles, His provision, and answered prayer, something awesome, where we're just so grateful, we write it on the seashell. I don't really know why we started doing it, but it's just become a thing. I don't think there was like a moment where we felt like a seashell meant something more than anything else we could have written on. But we love the beach. We love collecting shells. And we really have, we are committed to telling the story of God's faithfulness in our lives. Both Gio and I have just experienced so much kindness and so much like mercy and so many miracles that we are committed. We say to the Lord just whenever we say, God, if you continue to keep blessing us like this, we are committed to keep sharing it, because really everything we've been given is for us to give away because it matters, right? Like, it matters that we take the times in our lives that felt dark, that felt scary, that felt hard, that felt just like maybe it could have been the end, right? It just could have been the end of something that really mattered to us or the end of our rope. And we see God come through time and time again. It matters that we take those moments and we shine light on it for the next person behind us who needs the light. And so I have this little segment that I'm going to call Seashell Stories. It is not fancy, but that is because my producer, audio engineer, graphic designer, husband isn't here right now. This is the Wild West. And so I have no help in anything artistic. So this is my best idea. Seashell Stories. And it's actually kind of hard it's a lot of S's. And then there's an SH, and it's just a little tricky. So I have to say it kind of slow. Anyway, here we are. And the point of this segment, and it'd be fun if we had like a little jingle to go with it. Stand by for season 2 when we get fancy. Right now, we are just barreling through. The point of this is hopefully that if you need encouragement, if you need to remember God's goodness, if you need to remember that miracles happen, if you need to remember you're not alone, and that even situations that feel impossible aren't impossible, right? Like impossible is literally where the Lord loves to work and shine. The point of this is to remind you of that. So I think it will be fun to pull out a seashell and read what's on the back and then tell the story that goes with it. So the first seashell story I want to share is about how I got my car. And I currently drive my dream car, and I want to tell you, the bar is pretty low for my dream car because I'm not into cars, but I always wanted a white SUV, and specifically, I did like the style of Toyota Highlanders and I wanted like a tan leather interior. I never thought that I would drive that car. I was in a minivan, and that is all I had to my name. When we moved back here, me and the girls moved back here, based on our life. So previous to getting a divorce, we lived in Wisconsin and we rented. So we had no home that we had to sell when we separated. And before that, we were missionaries. So we had sold everything that we owned and like lived off of the support of people. So we did not have like a nest egg. We didn't have any investments. Like we didn't have anything. We also didn't have any debt, which was like amazing, right? Because that is also a nightmare to sort through when you go through a divorce. So having sold everything we owned, we moved to Mexico. When we moved to Wisconsin, we downsized again, and we showed up in Wisconsin with 10 pieces of luggage. I think that's what we whittled it down to. And then we're given a lot of furniture and things like that by people in the church. And then when we separated and ultimately divorced, and I came back here to Pennsylvania, like literally didn't have, I moved in with my parents. I stayed in a bedroom. Like I didn't furnish a house. I didn't even furnish the bedroom. That's like all I had, plus this minivan. And the minivan was not my favorite, but it got the job done, for the most part. But it had this pesky little like rusted spot above the back wheel that was just like falling off. Like pieces of my van were just falling. And maybe it's like a metaphor actually for my life at the time. But anyway, I would take it through car washes, and it would come out looking a little bit worse because it would pull off parts of that, like where that paint was falling off. So I came back one time, and I do remember my dad getting out like a navy blue Sharpie and just like kind of coloring it in. That was the shape we were in. But I felt like I wanted a new car, but it felt irresponsible at the time because I was just one income and barely making enough money, living at my parents' house, not even sure that I could afford a house. And that's another seashell story for another time, the house I got to move into. And so I cared for this van as best I could. I made sure the inside was vacuumed, I would clean it, like all that stuff, right? So I take it to the beach, and I knew I needed a new tire, but I didn't know actually how bad it was. And when I came back, I realized like, oh my word, I think my tire is like actually bald. So I took it into the shop, and they said, well, we can replace the tire, but if you want to keep the van. And I'm like, what do you mean if I want to keep the van? That's like one tire. This seems a little dramatic to just like get rid of the whole thing. And the problem was they tried to put it on the lift, and the bottom was so rusted that they could not put it up on the lift. So essentially they were like, hey, like the whole bottom of your car is just like, it's very bad. Like I felt like maybe I was a couple days away from just being like the Flintstones, like just feet on the ground, like the whole bottom's going to give out. And so I was like, what am I going to do? I've wanted a new car, but I didn't feel like it was the right season of my life to spend money on a new car and just get rid of my van for no reason. But now I had a reason. So what I have learned about myself is that when I'm in a moment where I have to make a big decision, and this was a big decision because like I have never bought a car by myself. And I do think it's overwhelming, right? Like there's a lot of there are a lot of shady car salesmen. Not all of them, but many. And then there's like shadiness about cars, right? Maybe not full disclosure or like minimizing the kind of damage that's done, things like that. And then there's just stuff you just don't know about the car. So I have learned about myself that when I have a big decision coming up, my coping mechanism is napping. I just go to sleep. So I am normally like a very driven person, but I have learned under stress, I take a lot of naps and I just like live in a land that's fake. I just don't even want to believe that I need to make a decision. Some would call that maybe like, mental paralysis. I don't know. I'm sure there's a real definition for it. So probably avoidance. That's actually probably the real word for it. So I kind of just like sat on this news for a month. I threw it out there to the Facebook world because I had done this before when it came time to find my house, and I got this miracle of a house, and I thought, wow, look at Facebook being redeemed for something positive. So I threw it out there again. Hey, I'm looking for a car. Does anybody have any recommendations? And a recommendation came in for a car dealership. So I went there and I had a certain amount of money and I wanted to pay cash. I did not want to get a car loan. I felt like in this season of my life with one income, I just didn't want to have any debt. And I hadn't had any debt for a while. So I had a budget, I had saved money, and I didn't have quite enough to get anything that could seat more than 5 people. And there was 4 of us. And I really had felt like I wanted a larger car. I liked having a minivan that could like haul people around, my kids' friends. Like I liked being able to help out and pick kids up from school if I needed to, or take people places. It felt like a way that I could give back in a season where I was still receiving so much support and care and all of that. This felt like a way for me to show up and be generous. And so I was pretty bummed, right? Like I just had to like settle in my heart. And I said to the kids, like, we just might be in a season for now that I need to get a 5-seater. We can't really haul people around and have the party van like we've had. And it's okay because like it's just a season. So I like actually had that conversation. We test drove a car. I had enough money for it. And I left the car lot. I didn't buy it, but I left the car lot with this feeling of like, okay, I guess that's what I have to do. And don't you know, on the way home from that car lot, literally I get a message that pops up from a friend. And this friend is someone who I was in small group with like 20 years ago. And while we've stayed in contact, like literally haven't hung out with this person in 20 years. Just a casual, like see them at church maybe or on the internet. And she reached out and said, hey, have you gotten a car yet? And I was like, well, oddly enough, I just left the car lot, but I like didn't buy anything. And she said, okay, cool. My husband and I got an inheritance from somewhere, and we wanted to give part of it away. And separately, we both thought of your name. And so we have some money we'd like to give to you. And I'm telling you, this is on the way back from like settling in my heart that I needed to just get what I could afford. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, thank you. That's amazing. She's like, and she said like, it's not like a ton of money, but we want to give some to you. So our definition of a ton of money is right different. And so they gave me a check for $2,500. And that $2,500 bumped me up into the category where I could afford. Now, this is pre-COVID, mind you, before all the prices of cars are just like astronomical. So it was like not astronomical. Where it bumped me up that I was maybe able to consider getting a 7-seater and I could be the party van again or the party wagon or whatever kind of car I got. And so I reached out to my car person and was like, hey, I actually have a little bit more money. Do you have anything? And she sends me this picture. And I don't think I told her that I wanted, like what my dream car is, of a white Highlander with like tan interior. And I was like, shut up. And it was right in the price range. With that $2,500, I was able to afford that car. And that story, like the timing of the text and the amount of money it was, everything about that story is so encouraging to me. So that's still the car I'm driving today, and this was six years ago that this happened, that I got my car. And was able to pay cash, was able to be the party wagon again, and still am. And I'm just like so grateful. But a couple things about that was, one, I feel like it's worth stating, like I made my need known. So I had a need, and I think sometimes it takes humility to let people know you have a need. Like not all of us love hopping on the internet or like even just telling people like, hey, I have a need. I need help. Saying I needed a car wasn't like that big of a deal, but for whatever reason, I felt like that season I was already pretty needy. Like a lot of people were already helping me, and I don't know, I think there was a part of me that just kind of felt like a burden. And so even just putting it out into the world that I needed something felt like a big deal. But I have seen over and over and over again, like when we make our needs known, people can come through. It's the same as when we let people know we're suffering, empathy and compassion can come our way. But if we keep it to ourselves, we're far less likely to have compassion and empathy come our way, because people just don't know that we're hurting or we have a need. So just this idea of being honest about like, hey, I have this need is, I think, a really big deal. And then the second thing is, the friend who reached out, like she knew I had a need, but she had no idea the internal like dialogue I was having about wanting to be the party wagon and having to like settle in my heart that, yeah, this isn't the season and it's going to be okay. She didn't know any of that. And I think it's very cool that they thought of my name and followed that prompting and are now part of what I think is like a miracle story of God's goodness and kindness and faithfulness and his perfect timing. And I think, so many times when we have a big transition coming up or a big decision we have to make, we're really afraid. Like we are really afraid that we have been forgotten, or that this is the moment where, the Lord's not going to come through, good things aren't going to happen for us. And I just want to remind you that like your name is on people's minds. And I pray like, Lord, when we have something that we need, or a big transition or a connection I need, like God, would you put me on someone's mind? And I believe in that kind of prayer because I see that over and over again in scripture, right? Like there are so many stories where somebody was on someone's mind or somebody's name got brought up and then the thing happened. And I think that that's a very real thing. So the combination of like making my need known, but also trusting that like the Lord will provide and my name will come up and my name is on people's mind. And ultimately my name is on the Lord's mind, right? And Jesus is my advocate. And I believe that. And so this story of how I got my car and how it's still trucking along today, to me is just a reminder that like God cares about all of the things. He does have good plans for us. And even if it had been a time where I did have to like downsize and get a different kind of car than what I had hoped for, I had reconciled that in my heart. Like I did the whole journey to get there, to just have like acceptance for what I needed in that season. And I think it's so beautiful that when we get to this place of acceptance, sometimes we get really surprised by a miracle, by a blessing, by grace. So anyway, if you needed some encouragement today that you're not forgotten, that God sees you, God cares about you, I hope that story encourages you. And on the flip side, let's be diligent about also asking the Lord, is there someone's name that should come to my mind? Like, if someone's name keeps coming to my mind, I should be asking the question, why? Maybe I should reach out. Maybe there's something, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But I do think being on both sides of that story, I have been on both sides of that story. I've been the person who's like, hey, their name is coming to mind. I know they have a need. I would like to show up for them in this way. And when this happened, I had made a promise to the Lord, like, whenever I have enough money, I want to pay this forward because this literally was a game changer for me. It was a game changer. And don't you know, just a couple years later, I got the opportunity to do the same thing for someone else, a single mom who needed a car. And that's a whole nother story, but I got the opportunity to like anonymously gift her some money that was the amount she needed. And it was the amount I had felt like separately, not knowing what she needed. It was the amount I was feeling like I should give her. And it turned out to be exactly what she needed. So I've been on like both sides of this story. And I think we can look around and call nothing a miracle or everything a miracle. And I like to call everything a miracle because it honestly makes life more fun, more fulfilling. And I do think it like points everything back to the kindness of God, which is what I want literally everyone to experience because I've experienced it and it's a game changer. So that was our first seashell story segment. Wow, another S. It's so much over here. So many things with that title. I'm going to have to talk to my producer and see what we're going to do with that little section. But I'm excited every time to pull a seashell out of that jar and tell a story of God's goodness. But what we need to talk about today, for the rest of this time, I have felt like I've been thinking a lot about what happens when our enemies are prospering right in front of us. What do we do when people are getting the thing we want and we've been waiting? How do we celebrate other people well when they have the thing that we're hoping for? You know, envy and jealousy isn't just a thing for children. We all have it inside of us, and we all call it something different. Gio calls it, for me, he calls it Petty Whoppington. So she comes out or he comes out in a, well, petty, but like obviously there's other things attached to that. And so sometimes Petty Whoppington comes out because Petty Whoppington is jealous or envious. Other people call it their mean girl or whatever, right? Like rises up inside of us. And I think there can be like embarrassment as an adult, right? Because jealousy feels like such an immature emotion. But I think the sooner we just name it and say it instead of pretending like we're not jealous of people. And I'm not saying to say it to the person you're jealous of. That is not the advice I'm giving. I'm saying to like, you know, your close circle of people that if we can just name it like, yo, I think I'm like jealous of this person's success. I'm having a really hard time. I think that's the first step to dismantling its power, honestly, in our lives. It's just being able to name it. And so, you know, I had shared on here a couple weeks ago in the episode of When the Brook Dries Up that there was some big changes happening in our life. And now I'm able to share it because it's public knowledge. But I am leaving my role at my full-time job and that I've been at for the last 3 years. And that's a whole episode and a half in and of itself, the way that job came into my life. And I feel like it was such an answer to prayer. And I feel like I needed this job more than this place needed me in some ways because it restored parts of me that had been like dormant because of other places I've worked in, other environments I was in that were pretty dysfunctional with like insecure leadership. And when you have insecure leadership, it affects you, especially if you're struggling with your own insecurities. And so for me, I had been in a work environment that I believed the only way to thrive was to mute myself to become an acceptable form of Mandy because the environment I was in did not celebrate a lot of the characteristics I bring to the table. And I came to this job and it was like night and day. It was like everything that I was great at, just naturally gifted at, was celebrated instead of being told that I'm just like a me monster and I just want a platform and a microphone and a spotlight and all that stuff. It was like literally give her a microphone because she's great at speaking. And this was the first time in such a long time that those qualities were celebrated. And so I say all of this to say, you know, the last 3 years have been so healing for me to have a boss that believed in me. And, my boss and I have a lot of the same skill set. And this is the difference between insecure and secure leadership, is that my boss had a lot of the same skill sets, but never once was it like a competition. And in fact, he would step aside and say, no, you do it. You go shine in that area. And I just have so much respect for that. I want to be that kind of leader where it's not like a jealousy of when you share a similar skill set with someone, there's like this unspoken competition if you're insecure. And so being at a place where I've had a secure leader has been so healing for me. And so anyway, that season is coming to an end. And it's not because I have the next step laid out. I do not. I would like to tell you that. This is probably the first time in my life that I am truly taking a leap of faith. Like, I know I moved to Mexico as a missionary, and that sounds like a leap of faith, but I actually had everything figured out. We had all the money we needed. We had a house lined up, like literally everything we needed. I had all my ducks in a row. And I could name a lot, like even coming to this job that I have now, I didn't leave my previous job until I had this one lined up. I guess it was a leap of faith, maybe because I was going into a little bit different line of work, fundraising instead of like a ministry role. But I think this is the first time that I'm like stepping away from something without actually knowing the next couple of steps. And I know there's a fine line between like a leap of faith and like a leap of stupidity. Like, I do recognize that. But as someone who operates with a pretty decent level of anxiety most of the time, I don't have anxiety. Like, when I moved to Mexico, I started seeing a therapist before we moved because I was like literally having panic attacks, which at the time I didn't know that's what those were. I had a lot of anxiety about that transition. Other transitions, similar, right? Like when I got divorced, same thing, panic attacks, all that kind of stuff. So this is a transition that is very big because, with blending our family, we have a lot more people to support. We have a house that we bought, unfortunately in 2022 because we had to, right? Because we doubled our family size. So it's not like we have the lowest mortgage. So there are a lot of things that would make this change feel scary. But I like really believe that this is a necessary ending. I feel like it's such I feel really cared for and celebrated by my boss, by my team. It feels like a really great ending, and it feels like mutually agreed upon that this season should come to an end. And I'm excited for what's to come next, but I truly don't know. So I'm in this season where I'm like, what am I doing next? And this isn't like, oh, I can just stay home because we have just so much money. We don't even know what to do with it. That's like not the case at all. But I will say in the last 2 months, every time I've kind of taken a leap of faith, these small steps of like, okay, like it's time to start the podcast. Okay, it's time to do this. It's time to do that. Oh, I'm supposed to quit this thing. Okay. Every time I have made that decision, another door opens. And that's not me just like over spiritualizing all of this. No, it's like literally what's happening. And so the day that I gave myself the freedom to like take this leap of faith, Gio started getting a bunch more work. All of these people reaching out to book him for stuff. And I don't think that's coincidental. I don't. I think there is something about an act of obedience or a leap of faith, whatever you want to call it, letting go of something makes space to receive something new. And it's not always instantaneous, but in this case, it almost was. And I'm like, I'm not great at obedience. I spent a lot of time in the corner as a kid. I'm in physical therapy right now, and I have to do this exercise where I like stand in the corner, like stretch where I stand in the corner and like, I don't know, whatever. It's just like a stretch, but it's like the first time he's like, I need you to just like get your face like really close to the corner. I'm like, this is very triggering for my childhood. Thank you. And I was like, I just need to know, how long am I going to be here? and am I in trouble? So I spent a lot of time in, like the corner because of probably like not obeying what I just didn't obey. And, I think back to the kind of kid I was, and God bless my parents. I would have to sit in the corner, and we had a bucket of potatoes for whatever reason. I do not know why. There was like a pail of potatoes as if we were Little House on the Prairie, but there was right next to my chair. And I say my chair because I do think I spent a lot of time in it. And instead of just being quiet in the corner, I would pick up the potatoes and I would play store. But what that entails is me making a beep sound over and over again as if I'm scanning every potato because you're checking out, right? So it would just be like beep, beep, and I would have like an attitude doing it. I just think about how much self-control it took my parents not to just take those potatoes and just launch them across the room because they were like already frustrated with me. And then I picked the most annoying thing to do, which was, play store with the potatoes. And then at the end, they would come over and tell me like, okay, you can get up now. And I'd be like, I'm fine. Thank you. I'm enjoying it here. So anyway, I don't have a great track record with obedience, always. And I certainly don't have a great track record with like instantaneous obedience or even quick obedience. And I do think that there is, if you're a follower of Jesus, there is this call in our lives to obey when we don't have the whole story. And so this might be the first time that I am not a delayed obeyer. I feel like this might be the first time that I feel like I felt something inside, like a real like assurance that this is the right thing, and I moved on it pretty quickly. And so I'm excited to see what's next. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I am trusting that the right connections, the right meetings, the right people, the right opportunity will come. And so I'm not exactly sure how I got to that. Oh, this is what I was going to say. So in the season of me kind of letting everything go, and I've been letting a bunch of things go in this season, I'm watching people around me prospering. And some of them are people that I'm not like a huge fan of, that like are people that have rubbed me the wrong way, or people I'm skeptical of, or people that honestly have caused harm or hurt for me. And I'm watching them prosper. And this isn't the first time in my life journey that I've had to sit back and watch someone prosper that I feel like, how do they get to have all of that? And I am here, but I feel like, man, I'm trying to take the high road. I'm trying to do all this stuff. Man, how am I like not prospering? And I remember when I was first divorced and I took my girls to their dad's house for the first time after he had moved into his new place. And I remember parking out front, and I was like filled with a white hot rage because it was literally a white house, like a big white house with a white picket fence. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. At this point, I'm still living in my parents' house in a bedroom. Like, I love my parents' house, but like literally all I had to my name was this bedroom that wasn't even my stuff. And I'm like looking and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And at this point, his like soon to be wife had moved in, and like he had a new car and this new job that he loved. And I was really struggling. I was on food stamps. I was not even working full time yet. I did not make enough money at all to like support me and my girls. And so a lot of people were pitching in at the time to help us financially. And I remember pulling up in front of his house and just my knuckles got white on the steering wheel. And I was like, oh my gosh. And on the way home, I just had this, I just had this conversation internally. Like, God, why does he get to have everything? How? After all this? And I can remember the moment. I know where I was driving. I know how white my knuckles were. But I felt this sense, this whisper, whatever you want to call it internally, where I felt like the Lord said to me, you are rich in ways that He is not and that you don't even understand. You are rich in ways. There's a richness about your life that you do not know. But trust me. And I think I was able to breathe a little better for that moment, but I can't say it took away all my feelings of jealousy or envy or just frustration, right? And it would be another year after that until I actually moved out of my parents' house and had my own place. And so it was really hard in that time to not get stuck on watching someone else prosper. Another time that it was really hard was the 6 or 7 years that I was single before I met Gio. And I just remember watching all my single mom friends finding someone, or just single people finding someone, just everybody finding someone. Everybody was or I would hear these stories of people's marriages being saved, people's marriages coming back together. They got the miracle that I was praying for. At the very beginning, I wanted my marriage to be saved. I wanted my marriage to come back together and my whole family. I just didn't want the pain for everybody involved and my children especially. And I would have to sit because I worked at a church, and we would give stories of all these exciting things. And a lot of the stories were and this person's marriage that was on the brink of divorce, actually it was even worse than that. And they're back together and they're thriving. And I would literally have to walk out of the room because I did not know how to respond to a story of when someone is getting the miracle that I was praying for, or that I had prayed for, and that I definitely wasn't getting. Because there was a time where I knew this is over. I had signed divorce papers, it's over. And I was hearing these stories about other people's marriages being restored. And that was incredibly difficult. And then when I was single and dating and watching everybody get married, it was are you kidding me? How is everybody out here finding someone but me? And that was really, really hard. And the list could go on, watching people around me get promotions. And I still, year after year after year, someone who had been there 1 year getting promoted, and I had been there 5 years, 6 years, all these years, right? And that's not easy. So what do we do? Whether it's an enemy or a friend, it's difficult too, watching our friends have these really amazing things happen. If we're really honest, sometimes that can even be hard too. We want to be happy for them, obviously, but when they're walking into the very thing that we're hoping to walk into as well, let's just be honest. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes we can feel jealous and forget to celebrate them. Maybe that's not everybody, but for me, it's true. Not always. It's just harder when it's something that I was hoping for myself. And so I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think about, okay, this isn't the first time that I've had a season where I feel like I'm watching people prosper, and I got a lot of questions. But I will tell you, if we do the work of healing, if we allow our hearts to heal and we forgive and we release and we get to acceptance, right? If we can move to the place of acceptance, when we're faced with the same thing later on, it is not as hard. I will testify to that. And so, because we have this archive of seeing the Lord come through time and time and time and time again, and we could start trusting the timing of our lives. That if a door is not open, we can start to say, then it's not meant for me. Instead of pounding our fists and going, but I want the door open. We have enough. At 41, I've seen the Lord do enough. I've seen what happens when you shove a door open and you force something to happen before it's time. I see the consequence of that. I've seen it over and over again in my own life because I've done that. And then I've seen what happens when we wait, and we wait with anticipation because we trust that the timing is what it needs to be. I've seen what happens. I see how there's like this easier flow to life. And so when I am in a season where I feel like, man, there are people just prospering. For me, I'm in my 40s. This is the time where financial experts talk about like, oh, this is your peak earning years. This is when you're making the most money. This is when you have the most to invest. And I'm like, I do not, that is not my experience. And because for Gio and I, we essentially started over. Like we lost everything we had built and we had to start over. And so we're like at what 28-year-olds are at, right? Where it feels like we're just getting started, but we're in our 40s when all of our peers are like putting additions onto their homes. And I'm like, how? I'm like debating if I can get a new mini blind system for my front window. That feels like a lot of money to me. And so I'm watching my peers just like being able to do so much, or like multiple vacations a year. And I'm like, we save for like this one vacation we take every year. And the list could go on, right? Where it could feel like, man, how is everybody else getting the promotion, the thing, whatever it is? And I go back to like, Mandy, you are rich in ways that you do not understand and that have nothing to do with like external factors. And I also go back to scripture that like time and time again, the Psalms is where I hang out when I need to be reminded of the truth, when I need to be reminded of who God is, and the prayers that are very honest and real. I hang out in the Psalms and I hang out in the places that's like, Lord, I'm confident in your goodness, so I can wait patiently for you. I'm confident, so I wait. I'm confident, so I give thanks. I'm confident in who you are. I do a lot of that. The other thing I think about is a scripture in Galatians that talks about be diligent in doing the work that was given to you to do. Like stay in your lane. This is my very, very loose paraphrase of Galatians 6. But basically, it's talking about everything you plant, you will grow eventually. And that sounds like great news if we're planting beautiful things in the garden of our life. But if we've been planting seeds of jealousy, envy, if we've been planting seeds of insecurity, insecure leadership, if we've been planting seeds of dysfunction and unforgiveness, like the promise is still that it will all grow into something one day. And that's not as great of a garden. That's not going to be a garden that you're going to love. And so I always go back to this thing. It's like, I want a life that's beautiful. I want a life that I love. So what is Mandy responsible for? Well, Mandy is responsible for planting seeds in my own garden in the little space that the Lord has given me called my life. And I'm responsible for every seed I plant because the promise is that that seed will grow. And I should not be shocked if I plant seeds of unforgiveness and I start growing anger, bitterness, resentment, right? Like, why would that be surprising? Nobody's shocked that when they plant a tomato seed, a tomato grows. That makes sense. But if you plant a tomato seed and you're pretty sure you're going to get a lemon tree, like, you're not. And you're going to be surprised, I guess, that the thing you wanted didn't grow, even though the seed you planted had nothing to do with what you were hoping to grow. And so I use this analogy in my own life of like, okay, how do I tend to my own garden? How do I stay the course? Because if I'm focused on everybody else's garden and I'm looking everywhere else, and even if I'm making decisions to try to sabotage someone's life, right, to make their life harder because I'm annoyed, and it's little ways, it's not big ways that I think adults sabotage. I think we do it in little ways. But if I'm putting any energy in hoping that someone else's life suffers because I'm annoyed that they're prospering, and weeds start to grow in their life, right? That's a weed. That's an annoying thing. That's hurtful. It's growing in their garden. Every minute I'm looking away from my own garden and focusing on someone else's is a minute that weeds are growing in mine too, because it's unattended. I'm not tending to the thing I've been given. And so now there's just both people losing. And at the end of the day, when you lay your head on your pillow, it does not feel great to know that you've spent your energy looking everywhere else but your own life. It doesn't feel great to know that you're sowing seeds in someone else's life that actually are harmful or hurtful. what actually feels great at the end of the night when you lay your head on your pillow is knowing that you did everything that you could do to plant seeds in your own garden that will grow a beautiful harvest one day. And that looks like seeds of forgiveness. That looks like seeds of acceptance, peace, joy, love, all those things, kindness, goodness, making the first move, right? Like being the first one to offer and I'm sorry. All these things are seeds we're planting with the promise that they're going to grow. And just the same, when we see people prospering around us or getting the thing we want, what do? I think stay diligent to your garden, stay diligent to your life. Know what is it that I'm here for? What are the things that I offer? What has God asked me to do? What am I supposed to be faithful in today? Because it will grow in the right time. I believe that and I have to trust it. And I'm about to embark on a journey where I might regret saying all of this in a couple weeks because it's really hard. It's hard to keep doing that. It's hard not to look around and feel like, why does everybody have everything that to me seems awesome? But my therapist asked me one time, Mandy, whose life do you want? If not yours, whose life do you want? And I really went through the list of people I knew, and there was not one life that I wanted to take on instead of my own because I knew deep down that every single person was fighting a battle too. And the stuff I could see on the outside and the stuff that maybe felt like it was amazing, I knew there was more to their life, and I knew it was a battle that I couldn't face or didn't want to face or that I certainly wasn't envious of. And so part of being able to celebrate other people and part of being able to like not want to see all of your enemies just fail, even all your friends, part of that is knowing, what are you here for? Do you even know? What are you doing with your life that feels meaningful or significant, or like maybe you're the only one that could do that thing because it's how you've been uniquely created? I think I'm stepping into that territory. I think I am finding what it is I've been uniquely created for, and I'm finally brave enough to walk into it. Gio and I, at the beginning of this year, we made these like, I guess you could call them like little vision boards or whatever. We took the time when we had literally a 2-hour window that was kid-free, and we sat down with a bunch of magazines and we cut out stuff that we like did a kids project where we like pasted it onto paper, and it's hanging on our mirror in our bedroom and we see it every day. And the biggest thing I have on mine, I'm looking at it right now, is timing is everything. That's what I stuck on there on January 1st or January, whatever date it was. It was sometime in January because that felt really important. I put also on there this beautiful little garden shovel, and it says, plant life. I feel like everything that's on this paper, there's another one that says on a mission. There's another one that says chill the F out. That one resonates. There's another one that says dry bones to life. Blended makes us better. That was for our family, right? I'm reading it right now. And I think this is the thing that keeps me grounded so that I can continue to plant the seeds in my own garden that will grow a beautiful life. I have to keep looking at this, stay the course. What is God saying that is my thing right now? If I can be faithful to that thing right now, I believe that there is beauty that will grow from that. I do. And the beauty doesn't always look like multiple vacations and additions to homes and promotions, because guess what leadership actually is? Gio said it perfectly this morning when we were talking. Saying yes to a promotion is actually saying yes to washing more feet, because a great leader serves their team. Like if you have 5 people that you lead, you actually have 5 bosses, essentially. It's not like you get to go in and just bark orders. I guess you could, but that doesn't make you a leader. A great leader is a servant. And if you want to say yes to that, you're saying yes to humility, like to be humble, to serve your team. That's not an easy task. And so I look at this vision board, I look at scripture, I remember all the times that every door has opened for me in the right time, and what it felt like to walk through that, where it was like this easy flow as opposed to like me walking down a path with a machete, trying to cut the brush out of the way so that I could forge this path ahead. I feel like in the times where I've waited, and it might have felt like a delay or procrastination, but I've waited for the door to open, it has felt like the path is already cleared for me and there's a flow that happens. And so to stay committed to sowing seeds in your garden so that beautiful things grow, even when everyone around you is looking like they have what they want, remember that there's a richness. There is a richness to your life that you might not even know. You might not even be fully aware. There's a richness to your life that you cannot measure externally because it's inside. It's a depth of empathy. It's a intuition you're developing. It's all those fruits of the Spirit that you now carry because of what you've gone through that are a literal gift to the people around you and the people coming up behind you. And for me, as I enter this new season, and for you, maybe it's a new season for you, or maybe you're watching everybody around you get the thing you want or the thing you've been praying for, or like the miracles happening for others, but not for you, or whatever it is. And maybe you hear stories even about my car and you're like, well, isn't that nice? So glad that happened for you, right? Like, it's okay that that's your first response because that can be mine too. And then what do we do with that? Okay. Actually, what that means is if it can happen for Mandy, it's possible to happen for me too. Miracles aren't just for a few, and miracles don't run out. There is room for the goodness of God all the time in every situation. And the goodness and the answer and the mercy and all of that comes doesn't always look like what we think. And so we trust, we're confident in the Lord's kindness and goodness, in his faithfulness. We're confident in that. And we give thanks, right? That I'm preaching to myself, and we give thanks and we wait with anticipation and we trust the timing that is set before us. Timing is everything. Friends, we're on a mission. We're on a mission to bring a light to the dark places, to give hope to people in despair, to remind people that you are not alone. We're on a mission. I want to be a part of that. I want to tend to my own garden so beautiful things grow. Guys, that's what I've got today. I hope you were encouraged. I hope you feel like you can tarry on just a little bit more this week in the waiting, in the delays, and in the detours. Can't wait to see you next time. And until then, tarry on.